In 1943, the great C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Abolition of Man. And there's a nuanced portion of that book that I've never heard anyone else discuss that deals with influencing future generations, how it really works. And I tell you, it is shocking. I'm Rick Walker, and I've spent 25 years as founder and chief investor at Imagery, scaling multiple organizations, one up to over 2,000 employees, another over 200 million. And my lifetime IRR is 39% on the investment side. I'm here sharing the anti-woke pro-family frameworks behind scaling wealth, wisdom, and relevance. You see, we often mistake technological advancement for true progress. I want to strip away these modern illusions so that you can see real structure of how building a legacy really works. And as we determine the way and the path forward, we begin to look at the greats. And there was no greater mind of the 1930s and 1940s than C.S. Lewis, and his work, Abolition of Man, proved as his theses. And one of the things we quickly notice is that the relationship between generations is not parallel. It is not equivalent. It is multiplicative in nature. The idea that one influences the other is very, very true, but it happens to such a stark degree. And understanding this deep trap allows us to protect our families from silent, systematic cultural conditionings that are derived from their instincts. The instincts that they think that they created on their own are really manifestations of the external influences of current and former generations. Because the dangerous thing about instincts, as Lewis told us, is that they always claim to be gratified only at the expense of all other instincts. They work as if they are virtues. And so this tends to be the great fight. Today, I want to share 3 critical points of how instincts work, how we use them to influence generations, and how humanity propagates its necessity and its survival cross-dimensionally and cross-generations. We give instincts names like feelings, or I think, or I have this opinion that. But what, or rather whom, is driving those instincts today? And even more so, who will be driving the instincts of tomorrow's generations? You see, instincts must mature into values if they are ever to carry meaning into future generations. Let me repeat that one more time. Instincts are meant to mature into values. They must upscale into values if they're ever able to meet any sort of relevance or any sort of promise of meaning beyond ourselves. Today, we're going to execute a clear 3-step analysis. First, we're going to dismantle the false narrative of human power over impulses. Second, we're going to look closely at how mankind's order alters the trajectory of history. And third, we are going to look at what the ramifications are if we do not act in the now. We celebrate scientific breakthroughs every day. We routinely call these achievements the triumph of mankind over the natural world, or the triumph of science, or the triumph of technology. This common interpretation is a fundamental deception. Nature is never entirely being truly conquered. Technology is never entirely being conquered. Instead, nature and technology are merely weapons used by some individuals to control other individuals. And let me get to my point. Do not judge me yet. The power developed in one era inevitably becomes a massive weight upon the next era. Power in one generation impacts generations to come. We do not actually conquer elements. We do not conquer nature. We do not conquer technology. We simply create newer, sharper tools to dominate our fellow human beings. This is what Lewis spoke about, the idea that societies function so that certain men can evict and persuade power over other men. This is really what the thesis of the Abolition of Man is in the first part. The total thesis of the book has to do with the necessity for us to become truly men, truly not just divine, not just guttural in our instincts, but true men. This is the famous operation that Lewis sets forth, is that we create men without chests, and we find that we're shocked to find traitors in our midst. What is a man without chest? It's a little bit like heart. A man is fully divine. This is the head, A man is also fully animal. We're part animal or fully animal. And the way that we become fully human is that we bring these two together. We create a heart, a chest, as Lewis calls it, to bridge the gap between the divine and the animal that makes us function. This is the judgment. This is the thing that brings out the values of the things that were originally valueless or evil even. This is the thing, the heart, the chest, is the thing that flips threats into opportunities. And this is one of Lewis's central theses that you'll find pervasive in the rest of his works that he sets forth very, very explicitly in The Abolition of Man. So we create men without chests, and we're shocked to find traitors in our midst. And this is where he sets us up on this pursuit of building men with chests. And we think about creating men of a certain type, men with chests versus men that are just guttural, men that are just intellectual. We think about ourselves in the role of a maker or a role of an influencer or a role of someone that is a engineer of one or two or three little people under our supervision. And what we call human ingenuity and human advancement is not just advancement over science and natural progress. In reality, human achievements are the advancement of certain men over others. Power is really the ability for one man to control whether other men may profit. You see this interplay in the economy, where you have one man that maybe has a product to sell, and he is in the role that he has to sell it in order to make money. Well, there's another man in the government that determines whether or not he can sell that and whether or not he will control the price of that and what he will tax for that. And if the taxes are too high, it makes it very difficult for that man to sell that object. Then the man also has to buy the object before he sells it. So the man that is selling him the object is determining how much profit he wants to make. And also the governmental agency is also trying to control the friction, control the prey, control the tariffs on that good in which he buys so that he can indeed sell. And then you have another man behind that then determines whether or not he's going to produce the item that the man originally is going to sell to the man that is then going to buy it and then sell it to the general public. And so if the man is not willing to produce it, the other two men are at his beck and call. And what are they going to do? Their options are limited. We find that in the end, whenever we follow the way that the economy works, the logical train of thought is that everything gets down to a handful of men that are running the rest of the men. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying this is a functional reality of how the markets operate. And so we find ourselves in a position where we think that the economy, we speak of the markets as they are, but in the end we realize that there are only a handful of men that are really making the liquidity, that are really making the decisions in the market and behind the market. I'm not saying this from a communistic perspective because I believe I'm the most free market person I've ever met. I am a Austrian economist, leaning American, but I do see that certain men are able to control other men, and the higher you get, the more lurking yet leery and hidden those motives can become. And real quick, if you have any young men in your life that you work with that help you run your investments that are 25 to 45 and you would classify them as underperforming, I want to give you a gift. This is my 2025 #1 international bestseller in the business leadership and also the business motivation categories called 9 Steps to Build a Life of Meaning. This book is what Dr. Ben Carson calls triumphantly hopeful. This is the story of how I found love, became a father, and grew businesses from 0 to 400 up to 2,000 employees, scaled organizations into 50 countries, and dealt with setback after setback. This is a working man's guide to life, to love, and to success. And this is my gift to you. No shipping and handling, nothing. Just DM me over on LinkedIn, Rick Walker TX. Get us Rick Walker TX. Just let me know what video you saw this in and your shipping address, and I would love to send you a copy at my cost, not your cost, but just as my gift to you to try to help rip away the comfort enslaving the young man that you love and you depend on. Thanks. My second point is I want to describe very, very clearly the impact that we have on future generations. All possible future generations, as Lewis states, are the subjects of a power wielded by those who are already alive. Let me repeat that. All future generations that are possible, these are ones that exist and don't exist, he says that they're all subjects of a power that are wielded on them by those who are already alive. That's important. That's important. Because when we begin to look at technology, we begin to get an idea of how decisions are made and how decisions impact those who come before and those who come after. Look, for example, birth control. Birth control is something where the technology does not merely give individuals this private choice to have a baby now or have a baby later. It is literally reducing the actual number of future human beings. Now, I'm not a Catholic. Catholics are mostly known as anti-birth control, but I use this as an example of technology. You could use the same example with abortion. You could use the same example with murders. The current generation actively decides whether subsequent generations are allowed to exist at all. This is a massive exercise of power and historical authority. Our descendants become passive recipients of our current cultural prejudices. They do not inherit any strength from us. They only inherit existence at the foundational level. Now, they inherit other things from us besides that, but if they cannot inherit existence from us, in fact, if we steal away existence from them, we are then impacting not only those future progeny, but also the people that they're going to marry and the future progeny of other people. This begins to create a cascading effect whereby the evils are propagated because there's less human beings and there's also fewer people to fall in love, to make great decisions, to make evil decisions that then need to be redeemed. You begin to strip beauty out of the world by reducing the number of human beings that are allowed into it. And so we begin to take up a very serious tone on the approach to future generations that those that are prior to them can afford or strip away their very existence. And I believe it's appropriate here to look at the foundation of all humans. When we go back to the Jewish scriptures in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says, God created man in his own image. In his image, he created him. That God is the purveyor of the first generation that he creates, and he creates in him his image. So the image of a man is that of a creator, and that is a creator that decides that the next generation is to exist. So if the meaning of the man is to represent the God who created him, you see in the capacity of a man, he also not only has the ability to create, but also the desire to not evict the existence of future generations beyond him. He has within himself a responsibility to ensure the sustenance and the existence of the next generation because God created him in his own image. In fact, that is the DNA response of all men and women, is to propagate through adoption, propagate through natural birth, propagate through relationships. The ingenuity of mankind, the survival of mankind require it. But then we move on to the next verse in the Jewish scriptures, Genesis 1:28, where God decides to bless them. So he makes this replicating little human being, this dirty, little animal that then comes to deceive himself and deceive others and rebel against God. But before that happens, God blesses him. God blesses him. What does he say? He says, be fruitful and multiply. So he reiterates the command that was in the prior verse, that they are to be a creator like he's a creator. They're to do as he does. They are to propagate like he does. But then they're able to have this blessing put upon them by the all-powerful, omniscient creator God, to be blessed, to be fruitful, and to multiply. And that same God is the one that's giving blessings to be fruitful and to multiply. That also means that you who are made in his image are also meant to give blessings to those who come after you, your descendants, to what? To be fruitful and to multiply. To be fruitful, multiply. So you are to create additional generations beyond you. It's a self-replicating model. Then he says, fill the earth and subdue it. Fill the earth and subdue it. So he wants to see little creatures of his like, who are deceitful, who are evil, who are slanderous. He wants to see them populate the entirety of the world and then to subdue it to its will, to subdue it. So you have a creative creator who's creating sub-creators, I believe as Chesterton called it, maybe it's Tolkien, sub-creators that then go out and create other creators, sub-creators, that are to take charge of the entire world, to populate the entire world, to multiply it, be fruitful within it, and then to subdue it, to enforce its will on the world itself in a way that brings out additional multiplication and additional fruit. And then he closes his blessing with this, and have dominion. And have dominion. It's almost as if God the Creator, who then makes sub-creators, who then shows them how to bless, so that they might bless others, to be fruitful and to multiply, to go and fill the world, to take up the space in which they exist and to subdue it, is now telling them to build kingdoms, to have dominion. And this is an interesting little point. In fact, it may be the point of all the points, that the capacity to have dominion is the same capacity as to create. Because it is only the imagining reality into being that one can ever have a dominion that he creates. And so we find our God propagating himself in a way that's highly unique. It's never been seen before, but also in a way where he expects for us to take the properties of that created being, replicate it, and then build a kingdom out of it. And for many of us, our kingdom looks like relevance, and it looks like a legacy family. The third component of what I believe Lewis is instructing us in the Abolition of Man, in this nuanced portion about building a legacy family and propagating our ideas into future generations, is this idea that we have to understand how the world works. Imagine the human race not on a continuum, but on a timeline where there's a definite start that we spoke about in Genesis chapter 1 from the Jewish scriptures, and there's also a definitive moment of extinction. No matter how your eschatological beliefs are, there is a moment of extinction at some point. We will do something stupid to ourselves to blow ourselves up if we're allowed to last long enough. We're not that good at propagating without propagating fools. So if you imagine humanity on that spectrum from beginning to moment of existence, the final generation of humanity will hold no real authority over their own destiny. They will arrive at the very end of a very long line of human engineering. And paradoxically, they will be the weakest generation to ever have walked the earth. Their minds and bodies will be the mere products of previous human planners. They're not masters of nature at all. They're not masters of technology at all. They are the final artifact, as Lewis calls it, of a design process they never chose. The conditioners of human nature will have won completely. The people that came before who engineered the propagation will have been seen to have been the most powerful, even though they're dead. And at that point, humanity is successfully reduced to no more than a manufactured product that will no longer mimic the definition of a human, because they will no longer be able to create in the image of the creator. And that is in itself the definition of unhuman, one that is not created in the image of the creator to propagate, one that does not give blessing of being fruitful and multiplying and take over the world, take over the space that you've been given and subdue it to build dominion. And so when we think about this final generation, this generation that's closest to the moment of extinction, we'll have seen that each generation truly does exercise power over the next. Each rebels against the traditions it was given. Each constrains the influence of the prior generations. That's the way it works. That's what you and I are doing right now. We're constraining the traditions that we were given. We're trying to break free of those things, but we're also trying to constrain others who are down line from us. Isn't that really if we're honest with ourselves, what is happening here. We're trying to rebel in one direction, but we're also trying to structure and control in the opposite direction. Those near the end would have fewer or no men left to impact. And so all they could do is rebel against the past. There would be no future-looking trajectory of what is to come, what is to be subdued and to have dominion over it. But what if we could invent a generation which you and I were blessed enough to be part of at the right moment of history, the right time when technology was at its most obeyance to the human will, but also at a time when we have the ability and the forethought to look ahead, to look beyond our impulses and look ahead at virtue and instilling virtue. What if we can instill a section of virtue within our chain of generations that then overwhelms the influences and the impulses of future generations, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 generations ahead? And so what if we could become that all-powerful generation with the weapons of psychology and ambition and attention on things like YouTube and estates controlling actions? If we were able to control the next generation entirely, to become what the prior generations pleases, we would then be able to claim for ourselves the title of the conquering generation. And all future generations after us would merely be the effects of our power and our will. And therefore, all future generations would have been preordained by us how their instincts were to behave. And in so doing, we would have made them weaker, not stronger. Why? Because optionality is the lone resource. You see, when we write our wills and our states, when we write our succession plans, when we write the rules of how our households will behave, when we give instruction to our kids and to our spouses, we so much wish to control. We so much wish that our rules be followed in the forward direction while we rebel against the traditions in the backward. And doing so does not give us more power. No. We will think of ourselves as the most powerful generation that's ever existed. We would think of ourselves as the one that broke through the curses of all prior generations. But in fact, we would be creating the weakest possible future generations. And that is the sure way to destroy your own relevance. Why? Because optionality is the lone resource. And whenever we try to influence the generations ahead of us, not just to give them virtue, not just to give them the tools that are needed for success, but to constrain their actions in a way that pleases our wills, we create out of those last men, and they may be, in fact, they are closer to extinction than any of us. We constrain these men and these women and damn them to be the subjects of the dead hands of us legacy builders. And we also make them the weakest, to have the least power to impact their dwindling future if they ever should have one. So there must be one dominant age in all. Out of all of humanity, from creation to extinction, there will be one dominant age. It will not be the last age, and it certainly was not the first age. There's a dominant age somewhere in the middle, and we need to determine whether or not we are participants of that or we're mere reactors to that. And this age would look like this. It would resist all impulses of prior ages and also dominate all subsequent ages in a way that they are irresistible to the will of that greatest age. Does that look like us? Does AI make that look like us? And the ability to instill impulse and instinct, that needs to still be the role of great men whose legacy they wish to keep beyond themselves. But they must allow for some creative improvisation. And as we think about humanity as a continuum between the beginning and extinction, we realize that out of all those ages, there will be one dominant age. And if we're selfish, like we know we are as humans, and we're prideful, like we were promised we would be, we would realize that all of humanity, at one point or another, has thought itself most likely to be the smartest and most advanced age that has ever existed up to that point. There is always a recency bias. And if we think about ourselves as being that dominant age, we would have to look around and figure out these two things. These two things are how you judge whether or not you're in the dominant age and how your generations should react to you. Number one, the dominant age is that age which resists all impulses of all prior ages. Are we reading old books? Are we listening to wiser people of the past? Are we following tradition? Are we instilling meritocracy? Or are we only looking ahead? I suspect that many of us are more traditional than the people that came before us, not after. That gives us a tip of the hand that maybe we're not the greatest generation. But what about the second definition? Versus, are we able to resist all past ages, all the influences from that? But the second part of the definition is, in order to be the dominant age of all generations, are we dominating all subsequent ages most irresistibly? Are we causing all future ages to have this irresistible sensation that they want to replicate and do what we want them to have done? I don't know. You look at the meaning crisis, you look at this provocation toward comfort and away from risk, away from reward. I think future generations will pity many of us. Pity the types of half men with half hearts that we become. Men that are solely minds or solely guts, like the devils. And men who are unable to ascend to the role which takes up their chests and their hearts, that are able to rule and make them fully men. I think we will be pitied by future generations, not revered. And that ability to instill impulse and instinct is the role of all great men whose legacy they wish to keep beyond themselves. But they must allow for some creative improvisation by the next age, by the next generation, because it is the creative instinct that was the first command. We're created in the image of a creator, and we're told to create as we were created, to create sub-creators, to create individuals that have dominion, that are fruitful, that multiply, to create many creators, sub-creators like us. But just as being fruitful requires fruiting, so too is the expectation that the farmer gets better at his skill, not worse. That the fruit should be sweeter in the second and third generations than it is in the first. And so we have this command that we make future generations better than us. And of course, with optionality as the lone resource, the best we can do is to give them the virtues that they need to carry them along, to maximize that optionality, which hopefully we leave them instead of enslavement like we desire to give them. So here are 3 possible takeaways for you based off of this nuanced perspective of C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man and the role of generations and legacy. Number 1, we have to take up the mantle of being a creative imager. We image imagers. We are a manufacturing of copy machines. We are not making illiterate, non-replicative beings. We're making beings that are makers of other beings. And one of the ways we can do this is to bring out beauty that encourages disgust and also sublime delight. To bring forth courage in the face of tragedy, because this is the creative impulse. And the creative impulse is that which brings virtue in the end when it is properly directed. Number 2, multiplication. We are not a people meant to have 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 kids. I've got 3 myself. I wish I had more. Children are blessings. In fact, once you're gone, they become the only blessing. They become the only blessing. We have to build a mindset of multiplication. Why are we allowing our kids, for instance, to give up the first 10 years of their 20 years of core birthing years to education? An education that they won't use, an education that won't pay them, an education that will be usurped by AI. You tell me. And finally, we have to learn to subdue, not to subdue others, but to subdue our own whims. In fact, it's said that the thing that bothers a man most about another man is the very thing that he needs to repress in himself. The thing I hate most in my neighbors is the thing that I most should hate in myself. It is an awakening, it is a quickening of my mind to the thing that I most need to fix urgently. So subduing is subduing ourselves, to converting our impulses and our urges into virtue. And we are to have dominion. We're to set up a small mini kingdom and then hand the keys of that kingdom to someone with more optionality, someone that can actually exist after we're dead, someone or some purpose that is higher and better. Because in the words of the great Bruce Lee in his book Striking Thoughts, aiming low is the only sin. So we must aim high. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, DM me over on LinkedIn. You can just search Rick Walker TX. You can just Rick Walker TX over on LinkedIn. Feel free to DM me there. And you can watch this video next to help move your family, move your legacy, move your wealth and your wisdom to the next level. Thanks, guys.